All right, welcome everybody. Today is June the 18th of 2020, and we are here today with Congressional candidate Dr. Ronny Jackson. Ronny, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. Enjoyed it. Hey, everybody.
Why are you running for Congress, Ronny?
Well, I'll tell you, Dan, really didn't have any intention running for office. I didn't. I just finished a long career on active duty. I did 4 years in the reserves and 25 years on active duty, so 29 years of service. And I can't say I've never thought about running for office before. It's crossed my mind a few times, really remotely though, not recently. And I was in the middle of a career on active duty. You kind of have to put that on hold. You can't do that when you're in active duty, obviously. So I kind of forgot about it. And I was moving on doing, doing what I was doing in the military as an emergency medicine doc. Initially with the SEAL team and some of the EOD and some of the special forces, and then later with the Marine Corps, and then eventually at the White House. But the reason I'm running is because I'm concerned about what's going on in this country. I really am. I mean, it sounds cliche, but I tell people all the time, for the first time, I'm really looking at what's happening on the left and the far left and the liberal press right now, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I am really worried about the future for my kids and my grandkids. And so I tell you, I have a unique opportunity right now to do something about it. And that's not something every freshman congressman or most freshman congressmen for that matter can actually say. Because the way our Congress is set up, we have Congressman Mac Thornberry there right now. He's been there 26 years, right? He's got a lot of tenure, a lot of authority. When he speaks, people listen. He provides a lot of top cover for this district just because of his tenure and nothing else. But the day he leaves, zero. It's gone. And so when I realized that Mac Thornberry wasn't going to run for Congress again, up here in the 13th Congressional District, and these are my folks up here, these are my people. I was born and raised in the Panhandle of Texas. My folks still live up here. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters. They're strung out all over the Panhandle of Texas, all over North Texas, mostly the Panhandle. And, I realized, Mac Thornberry's not going to represent that district anymore. I'm about to get out of the Navy, and I was putting my retirement paperwork in. I was about to get out, and I said to myself, those two things in combination with the third piece of the puzzle, which was I looked and I said, you know what? President Trump's getting reelected. I mean, the Democrats have just gone too far down this path. They can't turn this train around now. So when I stopped and thought about it, and this was as I was getting close to getting out. My wife and I were already putting my retirement paperwork in. We're super excited about coming back home to Texas, and I had a job lined up, a job that was going to be making a lot more money than I make on my Navy salary, to be honest with you. We're going to have a nice house, and everything was planned perfectly. But then I just looked at the fact that Mac Thornberry's leaving, I'm retiring, President Trump's getting reelected, and I said to myself, this is a really unique opportunity to get in the fight and do something about what's going on in this country. Not talk about it, not bitch about it, not complain about it, but do something about it. And I just decided, the more I thought about it, and I came to this rapidly over a period of just days, I thought to myself, the more I thought about it, it's not even like an opportunity for me, it's a duty, you know what I mean? And I spent my whole life in service to my country in uniform. And my service to my country in uniform is over now. I'm retired Navy Rear Admiral. But my service to my country is not over. And I'm just going to postpone the civilian life for a while. I'm going to get in here. I'm going to get elected, be the representative from the 13th Congressional District, represent the great folks up here in the Panhandle in North Texas. I see eye to eye with them on everything. I'm on the same page politically, socially, culturally, economically. I mean, just across the board. I share their values, their strong Christian conservative Texas values. I don't have to change anything about who I am to represent the folks in the 13th Congressional District. And obviously, to be effective as a representative, you really need that needs to be first and foremost, part of who you are, that you can really identify and represent the folks that you're representing. And I can, and that's why I'm here. And I'll tell you more in a minute. I'll tell you a little bit of the disgust that I have with D.C. and the swamp and the sewer that is Washington, D.C., and how that also kind of pushed me in this direction. But that's the basics.
So you've been in Washington, D.C. for how many years?
So I've been there for 14 years now, and on active duty. And I arrived there directly from Iraq. I was actually in Iraq when I got the job. I was with the 2nd Marines, working as the officer in charge of the resuscitation component of a surgical shock trauma platoon right on the battlefield. We were between Fallujah and Ramadi. And we were literally right on the battlefield. We got rockets and mortars every day. They shot at us from the perimeter. We had IEDs blowing up all around our base on a regular basis. And I was there as an emergency medicine doc. And those folks that were injured out in the battlefield, the Marines in and around our area of operation, that they came to me. And so I was out there with the Marines and taking care of some horrible injuries. You know, guys coming in with their arms and legs blown off, with their bowels hanging out, you know, with horrible burns from head to toe. Just a lot of bad stuff. But I did that for about a year with the Marines, and while I was in Iraq, I got offered a job at the White House, which I never even, honestly, I didn't even know they had a doctor at the White House. I mean, be honest with you, I guess it makes sense that they would have a doctor at the White House, but I never stopped to think about it. Certainly didn't know they had a military doctor there, but it turned out at the time they had 6, 2 Army, 2 Navy, 2 Air Force. And they were all family practice or internal medicine, and they had decided that they needed an emergency medicine doc at the White House, which to me, they should have come up with that a long time ago. I mean, you know, that's the most important specialty you can have at a place like the White House, you know, where you're protecting the president. But anyways, they saw the light. They said, we need an emergency medicine doc, and the Navy guy was the next one to roll out. So they reached out to my detailer. That's the guy in the military that controls everything about my life, where I'm living, you know, what my job is, where my kids go to school, you know, all those things. And he had thrown my name in the hat for this job just without me really knowing about it. So long story short, I logged onto my email one day, and it was an email account I wasn't checking pretty regularly anymore because it was an old account I had, and it was real difficult to check your email out there, to stand in line for a long time. It took forever. So I checked this email every 7 to 10 days, just kind of keep up with what was going on at the naval hospital that I'd come from, but I was at the Marines now. And I logged on one day and I saw this email. You've been selected to apply for a job at the White House as White House physician. And I thought to myself, wow. So I started looking at it, and I realized that it had been in my box for about 10 days, and the deadline was 5 days from when I saw the email. And they said, we need a copy of your CV, your personal statement, your last 6 performance reports, your security information, your official photo, just a list of stuff 10 miles long that they wanted. And they said, we need it by Friday, you know, so 5 days away, right? So I thought to myself, wow, this is a great opportunity, but there's no way I'm doing that. There's no way I can get a package. I'm in the middle of the desert. So I wasn't really going to do it. And luckily I called my wife that night, and I spoke to her and I told her about it. And she said, well, Ronnie, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm not going to do it, Jane. I can't, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, I can't get it done out here. There's no way. She said, well, look, you know, you should go ahead and give it a shot. You know, it may be important in your career later on that you were actually, you know, considered for the job. So at least make an attempt, get your stuff in so you can say you're officially considered for the job. I thought, you know, that makes a lot of sense. You know, it's worth doing, you know. And so I went ahead and, you know, she was digging stuff up from the filing cabinets back home, trying to fax it to them. I was ginning stuff up electronically out there, trying to get it into them. But I figured everybody was going to have these nice squared away packages. I was just going to have this big pile of garbage, and I thought this is just a waste of time. But I got it all in by the deadline. And then I didn't actually hear anything about it for about 2.5 months, not a word. And I was trying to figure out what happened, and I was just making the assumption somebody else must have got the job, and I'm out here, I hadn't heard about it. Once again, got back on that email. This is about 2.5 months into it. Boom, there's an email in my box. Been there for 7 to 10 days again. You know, I think I would have learned my lesson about checking the email, but kind of thought, you know, that opportunity was gone. But there was an email in there that said, hey, you've been selected as one of 3 people to interview for a job at the White House. So I said, wow, I couldn't believe that I made it that far, but I was kind of hit with the realization that, you know, this is where the road ends. You know, I mean, there's no way I'm going to be in D.C. in 5 days. So I tell folks all the time when I tell this story, a lot of what happens to you in life is about being in the right place at the right time and having, you know, someone around you that sees opportunity even when you don't see it for you, right? And then also having someone that basically can, you know, can make things happen for you and wants to see you succeed, but doesn't really have anything to gain from your success. Those are the people that genuinely can really help you go far in life. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that the commanding general of the Al-Anbar province, all the Marines out there in Iraq where I was at, well, he had been the military aide for Bush 41, for the first President Bush. And so he knew exactly what they were asking me to do. He had lived that, right? Because at the White House, the doctor, the military aide that carries the nuclear football, and the Secret Service agent that's primarily responsible, that's in charge of the President's protective detail, those 3 people are together all the time. It's what's called the Emergency Action Team. And they're together 24/7, 365, and always just a few steps away from the President. So this guy knew exactly what I was being asked to do because he'd lived it for a few years and he knew what the doctor's job was. I didn't really understand what the job entailed. But he found out about it. I didn't really know the general that well, but I'd seen him walk through our surgical tents a few times, you know, when we were receiving casualties. So I'd told my commanding officer, who told his commanding officer, and he told the general. The general summoned me to his office and he said, well, tell me what's going on. So I told him the story and he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, sir, there's no way I'm going to be in Iraq, and I mean, be in Washington, D.C. from here in Iraq in 5 days. That's not going to happen. I said, but I'm going to see if I can do a video teleconference or maybe a phone call or something. I don't know how competitive I'm going to be, but I'm going to give it a shot. And he said, all right, stand by. He picked the phone up. called the air boss, the guy that controls all the air assets, the helicopters, the planes, everything in the area. I talked to him, and just to kind of paraphrase, the last thing he said was, "I want his butt out of here by sunset." And he hung up, and he goes, "Go pack your crap, you're leaving." I said, "Yes, sir." So I went back to my hooch, to my where I lived, and got my sea bag and threw a bunch of stuff in it. And he flew an emergency medicine doc in from a nearby base where they had 3 of them. I was the only one at our base to backfill me. I got my bag, went straight out to the flight line, got on a helicopter, flew to Baghdad, got to Baghdad, got on a C-5 cargo plane full of broken helicopters, flew back to Cherry Point, North Carolina, got there, got a rental car, drove up to Virginia Beach where I was living at the time, and I was kind of in a panic because I was supposed to be at the White House the next morning interviewing for this job. And when I was out there not receiving casualty, I was working out all the time. So I was running like all the time and stuff. I'd lost 40 pounds out there. I had no clothes that fit at all. And I was supposed to interview 2 days in a business suit and 1 day in a uniform. So I was kind of in a panic. Next morning I'm supposed to be there. So my wife and I went down to the men's warehouse. I bought a brand new suit. I gave them my sob story, begged them to help me, fix it. They tailored it for me there on the spot, kind of made it presentable. Brought my uniform in. They helped me get that kind of, presentable. Then I jumped back in my rental car, drove to D.C., interviewed for the job for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, they told me I got the job. I went back to Iraq for 4 months, finished my tour in Iraq with the Marines, and then came straight from Iraq to the White House. That was in early 2006. And I was the brand new junior physician for President Bush and Mrs. Bush for the Bush administration. So that's how I ended up at the White House. And to be honest with you, I was only supposed to be there 3 years. And I got there the last 3 years of the Bush administration. But what happened is those other docs I was telling you about, the other 5 docs, there were 6 of us, and I was the new junior doc. Those guys were way senior to me. They were all captains and colonels, and they'd been in the military for 20 plus years. Well, at the end of the Bush administration, they all put their papers in, and they were retiring and moving on. So overnight, I went from being like the most junior guy to one of the most senior guys. So what they did is before the Bush administration was over, they restructured the White House Medical Unit and then made me the deputy director of the White House Medical Unit. And the Pentagon extended me on active duty there for another 3 years. So I started off, I was doing that. My job as the deputy director of the White House Medical Unit was to take care of Air Force One and the Presidential Helicopter Squadron, the White House Communications Agency, Camp David, the Secret Service, all the guests and visitors and all the staff at the White House. That's what I did. And I took care of them at the White House, anywhere in the United States where the president was traveling, and all over the world. So I did a lot of contingency planning all over the world, and that was my job. I did a good job doing that, for the next 3 years. And they extended me again, the Pentagon did. They cut me a new set of orders and extended me as the director of the White House Medical Unit. Then I got extended as the physician to the White House, physician to the president, assistant to the president, and senior advisor to the president. And every time I moved up, to a new level of responsibility, the military cut me a new set of orders on active duty there. So that's how I ended up at the White House, literally for out of the 29 years that I was in the military, the last 14 years at the White House. And, I wasn't going to be there when President Trump got there either. I was planning to leave right after President Trump got in. I'd already put all my retirement paperwork in. Like I said, I was coming back home to Texas, super excited about it. But it just so happened that the transition team for President Trump was made up of all Bush folks. And when they found out I was there, they started a campaign to kind of keep me there and eventually talked me into staying for another 6 months just to do the transition. And that was my plan, stay 6 months, move on. I told them I'll find somebody to take my place that you're happy with, that you're comfortable with, and then I'm out. And, my wife was already looking at houses, in Texas here, up in the Amarillo area. And she was looking on Zillow for almost a year, just getting super excited about moving back home to Texas. And then what happened, though, is I got really close to President Trump. And, I didn't see that coming. He didn't see it coming. But, he kind of, he and I got, we developed a relationship quicker than just about anybody I've seen in the 3 years I was at the White House. We developed a really tight relationship. And the way that happened was, to be honest with you, my office is directly below the president's bedroom in the White House. And every morning, people, out there, that are watching us today, they know that they see enough of the TV to know that President Trump, he's probably up 3 hours, before anybody else shows up at the White House for work. He's tweeting and talking on the phone and watching TV, and and before anybody else gets there to start their day. By the time he drops down that elevator, he's looking for somebody to talk to. And I'll be the first person he'd see in the morning, the last person he'd see in the evening, and he'd come out and he's like, "Did you see this? Did you see that?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir." We'd start up a conversation. He'd be like, "Walk with me." So I'd walk him to work. I'd walk him down the West Colonnade, the Oval Colonnade, right into the back of the Oval Office, and we'd finish up our conversation, and then, the chief of staff, national security advisor, whoever else would be in the outer oval waiting to come in. I'd finish up, I'd walk out, they'd walk in as day would start. And I got in the habit of doing that. I walked him to work about 3 out of 5 mornings. And we just developed a really tight relationship. He developed a lot of trust and confidence in me. And that's how I ended up staying for, over 3 years, for the first 3+ years of President Trump's administration. And I just left the White House on December the 1st of this last year, not even 6 months ago. And I just left active duty, just retired from the Navy. So I'm a retired Navy Rear Admiral and former physician and assistant to President Trump. And I got this unique opportunity to get in the fight right now and represent the folks that I care about up in here in the 13th Congressional District in the Panhandle of Texas, where I was born and raised, and that's what I intend to do.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So you've gotten to see what they call the deep state up close.
I
You
have
know
seen
how
the
it
deep
works.
state. It's surreal. I mean, anybody wants to debate whether or not the deep state's real, come talk to me. I've been the victim of it, and I've seen their efforts to just completely undermine the president for 3 full years from the inside of the Trump administration. And God bless the president. He hasn't let it stop him. He's a fighter, and he's stayed in there. And despite the fact that he's got the far left and the liberal press and the Rhino Never Trump Republicans all trying to undermine him, all contributing to these deep state efforts to bring him down. And despite that, he stayed in the fight, and he's been successful, and he's continued to do unbelievable things for our country. And I mean, I tell people all the time, they have been trying to cut his throat since before he even got elected. When it looked like he might get elected, they started. But the day after he got elected, before he was even sworn in and became our president, there was an unbelievable effort all over this country, in all the executive departments. And we're seeing a lot of that coming out now with, John Brennan and Clapper and Comey and all these folks that were part of the deep state that were making this coordinated effort, to undermine the president and basically delegitimize his presidency and get rid of him before he even got sworn in. And despite that, he's done incredible things for our country. And you just have to ask yourself, what would have happened if they would have left him alone and let him do his job? So that's going to happen, though. He's getting another 4 years. And you think he's emboldened now. You wait till he gets in this next 4 years. He's gonna shake some stuff up and make some changes, and he's going to keep America great, I promise you.
Why do they want to undermine him?
Well, he's not of them. He's not of the swamp. He's not a politician. He's not part of their internal clique. They work hard to pick the candidates and to decide who the winners and losers are. They do that. That's who they are. I'm in this race right now, and that goes on in the city of Amarillo right now as we speak. We've got this group, Amarillo Matters, who's used to manipulating all the politics in this city and, in parts of this district. And there's always somebody out there that thinks that, that they have the power, the influence, and the authority to decide who the winners and who the losers are. And they don't think that the people, the voters, the constituents, are smart enough to elect their own leaders. And that's what we see going on in parts of this race that I'm in right now in 13th Congressional District, specifically here in Amarillo, with some of the stuff happening here. But that's what we see nationwide with President Trump and what's been going on for the last 3 years. And I just think that the voters decide. The voters get to decide who their elected officials are, including the representative from the 13th Congressional District. And the outgoing congressman, he doesn't get to pick that person. He served us for 26 years, but that's over. It doesn't mean that he served us for 26 years and he gets to pick his successor. That's not the way it works. The voters get to decide. And so I've been out there staying positive, telling the voters what I can do for them, showing the voters what I can do for them. Mm-hmm. And, I'm going to get elected on my capability, my leadership, and my ability to go in there, my relationships and my corporate knowledge, my experience to go in there and do something special for this district, and to be unique in the sense that I'm a freshman congressman that can really make a difference in this country.
So you joined the Navy. Why is it that everybody in the Panhandle joins the Navy?
I don't know. It's a good question.
It's like
right?
the farthest place from water there is on Earth.
Yeah, you're right. And I'll tell you the way it happened for me was I needed the military to pay for my medical school. I grew up in a blue-collar family. I was born and raised in the Panhandle of Texas and Levelland, Texas. My dad's an electrician. My mom's a homemaker, very blue-collar. you know, my mom and dad, they put food on the table when I was growing up. They gave us the necessities, but we didn't have a lot of extra money. You know, we didn't have a lot of spending money. My dad was a small business owner, owned his own electrical business. Him and his twin brother had their own electrical business for the first, 45 years of his life, and then they ultimately sold that. My dad worked after that as a pumper in the oil field, you know, and my whole family's worked in the oil field. I worked as a roustabout in the oil field, paid for every penny in my college doing that. But my brother was in the oil field as well. So, but, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, and I was able to work full time. And I mean, I've been working full time since the age of 13, 14. When I say full time, I mean 32 to 60 hours a week. And all through, you know, middle school, junior high, and high school. And in my family, if I wanted something, I had to pay for it. Right? If I needed a car, I bought it. I paid for my car insurance. I paid for my clothes. I paid for the furniture in my room. You know, I paid for everything. You know, and that's just how it was in my family. And I didn't give it that much thought. We worked hard, and you know, and we appreciated what we had, which a lot of kids don't nowadays. Yeah. But anyways, I was able to do that, work, you know, at United Supermarket from the time I was 13, 14 till I got out of high school, sacking, checking, stocking, whatever needed to be done. And I was there all the time, every day after school. You know, on Sundays right after church was over, I was there until it closed. I was there all day on Saturday. And a lot of my friends were out, you know, running around playing football and sports and doing all kinds of stuff. I worked. And, but, you know, that paid for my education, you know, early on when I first got out of high school. But pretty quickly I needed more money. And so I went to work as soon as I got out of high school as a roustabout out in the oil field. And that's how I really paid for my education, was working out in the oil field. Because, you know, when you're 17, 18 years old, you're working as a roustabout out in the oil field. That's good money relative to some of the other stuff you can make. That's a lot of money. And it kept me going. And so I went to school at South Plains College. It's $13 a semester, our junior college. And, you know, ended up going to college there. Then ended up transferring to Texas A&M at Galveston. And the reason I went to Texas A&M at Galveston, I'm going to get back to your question about the Navy, is because I wanted to be a marine biologist. And just like the Navy, you're like, marine biologist, but it's all tied together, right? So what had happened is when I was growing up in Levelland, oddly enough, there was a highway patrol officer from Brownfield, from a nearby town we have out there, right? And he was coming up to the junior college teaching diving class, a scuba diving class. So when I was about 15, me and one of my best friends I worked at the grocery store with, we took this scuba diving course. And we fancied ourselves as divers. We loved it. You know, we drove all over Texas and New Mexico, diving spring-fed lakes and quarries and stuff, you know, and it was awesome. You know, Balmaray, Santa Rosa, all kinds of places like that. But, you know, whenever I got, you know, into college at South Plains College, I was a biology major. But I got into diving so much and really wanted to, like, you know, dive more and you know, and get into that, you know, as a career to some extent. I started thinking about being a marine biologist. And so once I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist, that's what led me to Texas A&M at Galveston. That's where all the marine majors are: marine transportation, marine engineering, marine biology. So I ended up there, and that kind of led me to why I was in the Navy as well, because while I was at Texas A&M at Galveston, I met my wife. And I have a wife, Jane. We've been married 27 years. We've known each other for 31, 32 years because we met at Texas A&M at Galveston. And she checked in. She was a freshman. I was working as a resident advisor, making extra money on campus too. And I was still going home every spring break, Christmas break. Anytime I had more than 3 days off, I was back out in the oil field, you know, making money for the next semester for books, tuition, and fees. But I didn't have quite enough money to kind of entertain my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. So I went across the street to the University of Texas medical branch. It's the original medical school for the University of Texas, the biggest one, you know, the first med school for University of Texas. And I went over there to see if I could get a job working in one of their labs to make a little extra money. So I said, "Do you guys have something I can do when I'm not in class?" And they said, "Yeah, you bet. We got some programs that the med students are not taking advantage of, you know, some work study programs. We can find something to put you to work." So they called me back a few days later and they said, "Hey, we got a job for you working in the pathology department. You're going to be an autopsy assistant." I was like, "Autopsy assistant?" I was like, "All right, well, it's not what I planned on doing, but I'll do it," right? So that's what I did. I mean, my job was to take the organs out, you know, the body, and take the skull off and get the brain out and pass it to the table at the end. And the pathologist would dissect everything out and figure why the person died, right? Mm-hmm. And but what happened is those guys started teaching me a little bit. And I'll be honest with you, never, ever, not 1 second, not even for a fleeting second, did it ever cross my mind to be a doctor. Just never did. And but when these guys started teaching me, they're like, "Hey, you remember that liver you took out yesterday?" And I said, "Yeah, come look at this one. This guy's got liver cancer. See the difference?" I started getting a little interested in medicine. I thought to myself, you know what, I might want to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to be a pathologist, you know, but I'd been a volunteer firefighter for years and years in Levelland, you know, where I grew up. My whole family, we basically over 50% of the fire department was all Jacksons, and generations, So I'd worked with paramedics and EMTs and firefighters, for years. I knew right away I wanted to be an emergency medicine doc, an ER doc, which is what I am, right? So I had one big problem though. I was excited about going to med school now, but I had no way to pay for it. So I applied for the scholarship. I was in the Corps my first year at Texas A&M, so I thought, well, maybe the military's got a way they can help me pay for this, because I couldn't go home and work in the oil field, Christmas break and spring break and summers and make enough money to pay for med school. And my family, quite honestly, my dad taught me a long time ago that if you don't have the money to pay for it, you probably don't need it. And there's no way I was borrowing that kind of money. So I talked to the military, and they said, look, I talked to the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. And they said, we got this program. If you get into med school, we'll pay for it, but you got to get in first. I said, okay. So I applied to in-state schools because I couldn't afford to go out of state if it didn't work out. And I got into UTMB, where I really wanted to go there, where I was in Galveston, where my future wife was at, and where most of my friends were at the time. And so I went back to the Navy, and they said, yep, we'll pay for it. We'll pay for your 4 years of med school, and you owe us 4 years payback, year for year. I said, man, that's a great deal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great deal. They pay for my books, tuition, fees, gave me a stipend to live on. Everybody else was going into massive debt. I got friends that graduated med school owe over $200,000 in debt. I had money in the bank because I was actually working out where I had, a little bit of money every month left over. I was just putting it in my checking account and saving my money. And so when my wife and I got married between my second and third year med school, we had a pretty good foundation to start on. Didn't have any debt, which was great. Once I got into med school, once I got the, you asked about the Navy thing, I was thinking about, well, I got the Army scholarship and I got the Navy scholarship. So I thought to myself, man, do I want to be in the Army or the Navy? And I thought to myself, man, I love diving. I love the water. I was like, I don't want to get stuck in an Army base somewhere in the middle of the country. The Navy's got cool bases all over the world, right? I mean, they're always on the coast. There's water somewhere, right? And so I picked the Navy because I love the water and I love that, that environment. And that's really why I picked the Navy. And I didn't know about a program they had that I found out later on as soon as I got in the Navy, a diving medical officer program where you could be a diver and a doctor. And I'll tell you more about that if you want to hear about it in a minute. Yeah. But that was just fantastic because that was the best of both worlds. When I found out about that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. I can be a diver and a doctor. So I did that. I applied for that program. They sent me immediately to a Navy deep sea diving school in Panama City, Florida. I became a fully qualified Navy deep sea diver, walking around the bottom with the helmet and the hose and the boots and everything. And it was great. And so I was a certified Navy diver and I was a physician. So for the next 5-6 years, they preferentially assigned me to diving units. So I was with explosive ordnance disposal, underwater demolition teams, underwater salvage teams, and Navy SEALs. And that's what I did. And that's what hooked me. That's why I could have got out in 4 years, and I thought I was going to get out after my payback. But that's really what hooked me. I loved the service to my country, but I loved my job. All I did was travel all over the world with these small diving units, jumping out of airplanes, fast roping out of helicopters, locking out of submarines with the SEALs, and blowing stuff up and shooting all kinds of weapons. It was like being 14 and getting a paycheck, Yep. So it really hooked me, and that's how I ended up staying. And I realized at some point that I had to get board certified in a medical specialty to continue getting promoted in the Navy, and I decided that I was going to make a career out of the Navy. So I went back to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia, got in the emergency medicine residency program, got board certified in emergency medicine. That was in 2004, 2005. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan were kind of hot and heavy at that time. And if you were a Navy board certified emergency medicine physician in 2004, 2005, by default, you belonged to the United States Marine Corps. That's where they needed us. And so as soon as I got board certified, became an emergency medicine doc, they sent me straight to Camp Lejeune. I married up with the 2nd Marines. Went straight to Iraq with 2nd Marines, and we're full circle now where I started the conversation back in Iraq. So that's how it all kind of played out.
That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And now you're back in Amarillo, Texas. Now,
yes, sir.
A lot of people, I know your opponent tries to make an issue that you're not from the Panhandle, but how far does they consider the Panhandle go south here?
Well, if you're not sure, go online and just look it up. Just Google Panhandle of Texas. And some of the first sites that pop up will be Texas Parks and Recreation, Texas Department of Transportation, the Texas Historical Society, and every one of them give you the boundaries of the Texas Panhandle. And every single one of them, level land, is in the Panhandle. It's in the base of the Panhandle, just like I've been telling people from the very beginning. I was born and raised in the Panhandle of Texas. And the fact that my opponent wants to spend all of his time talking about nothing but the geography of the Panhandle really just kind of reveals, what an empty vessel his campaign and his platform is right now. He didn't have anything to offer the voters, really. I mean, all he talks about is me, and he's always coming up with some reason why, folks here shouldn't vote for me, and he's never telling the voters why they should vote for him. And I've been positive in this. I've been telling voters from the very beginning, I'm going to tell you why I'm your best candidate. I'm going to tell you why you should vote for me and make me your representative. And I've taken it another step. I've gone to the point where I'm not even talking about it anymore. I'm showing the voters what I can do for the district. We've started an aggressive program now. This COVID-19, has caused a lot of hardships on people all over this country, including up here in the Panhandle. People have been worried about the health of their family. It's been economically devastating. It's driven small businesses completely out of business. It's been horrible, right? But there is a silver lining on this. We just have to look for it. And the silver lining that we have here in Amarillo is that right now the president has identified the fact that our pharmaceuticals coming from China and India is a national security issue. Even as a physician, I didn't know that we get so much of our pharmaceuticals and our antibiotics and our insulin and all the active ingredients from China and India. I didn't know that even as a physician. But now this coronavirus has uncovered that, and everybody's seen that, right? Well, there's a lot of people concerned about it, including the president. And he said, this is a national security issue, and we're going to stop it, right? We're going to bring drug manufacturing back to the United States. Now, the unusual thing with this, both sides of the aisle are saying the same thing. The Democrats and the Republicans are saying the exact same thing. We got to stop this. We got to bring drug manufacturing back to the United States. That means one thing. That means we are about to have a huge legislative push to make that happen. It's going to be followed by lots of federal money, grant money and loans and all kinds of incentives to make this happen, right? Well, I looked around and I said, you know what? Why not Amarillo, right? It's going to come back to the United States. It might as well come back to Texas, and more specifically, it might as well come back to Amarillo. How many people can say they have a school of pharmacy? We got a school of pharmacy here. Right. We got a school of medicine. We got an association with the Texas Tech Health Science Center. We got a school of veterinary medicine here, right? We got an association with dental school even. We got Amarillo College, which can train a workforce. We got West Texas A&M. We got Texas Tech. We got an interstate highway system. We got an international airport. We got a rail system. We got a great tax incentive here being the state of Texas. And we got the friendliest folks in the world up here in the Panhandle. We've got a lot of incentive for them to make this one of the areas where that comes back to. So I said to myself, I reached out to some of the local leaders we have here, Jerry Hodge, who a lot of folks know here. He built the baseball stadium and things of that nature, but he started his career as a pharmacist with Maxwell Pharmacies, and he's a trained pharmacist. So I reached out to Jerry right away, and I told him, I said, hey, what do you think about this? And he thought, it's a great idea, Ronnie. Why aren't we got to do this. We got to make this happen. Yeah. And he got together with some other businessmen, Alex Fairley and some other folks that are well-known business folks in Amarillo, Texas, and we started meeting about it. And I said, obviously I don't have any financial interest in this. I'm going to be the representative from the 13th Congressional District. I'm going to be in Congress. But you know what? I live here. I'm a citizen of Amarillo in this district. I want to do everything I can to make sure that our district is prosperous as it can be. So we talked about it, and I said, I know some folks, that are working on this. I reached out to the president's team on this. I reached out to Peter Navarro and his team. He's president's lead economic advisor. They're working on bringing all of manufacturing back from China, including drug manufacturing. And we talked about it, and we just decided there's no reason why Amarillo can't have a large, generic pharmaceutical manufacturing plant right here in Amarillo. It will create tons of jobs. It will diversify our community and will make us stronger. Right? So we're working hard on that. So I've been doing that on the other side of the district. I've been working really hard. We have another opportunity over there. We have Space Force, which is now the 5th branch of the military. It's a done deal. The president signed it. You see they had a thing in the Oval Office where they showcased the flag and everything. It's done, right? But the mission hasn't been defined yet. And the location of where this stuff's going to happen hasn't been defined yet. So I started digging into that a little bit too, and I found out we got to be careful. We've had a lot of top cover over the last 26 years from Mac Thornberry just because of his tenure, 26 years. It gives us a little top cover on issues. You're about to have freshman congressmen now. There are certain things that are going to happen. They already trained the mechanics for the intercontinental ballistic missiles out at Sheppard Air Force Base. That is now becoming a mission of Space Force, right? So the question is that going to stay at Sheppard, or is that going to move somewhere else to consolidate with other Space Force missions? Well, if I'm your congressman, it ain't leaving Sheppard. It's staying at Sheppard. And not only is that mission not leaving Sheppard Air Force Base, but we're going to dig into the mission of Space Force, and we're going to find out what else can we bring to Sheppard Air Force Base as part of the Space Force, right? There's a golden opportunity right now for the early bird to get the worm on this, and somebody who's got a voice. And I've got a voice. I know people in the executive branch. I got the president's ear. And if we can come up with a plan and we can talk to people and we can identify what we can do at Shepherd Air Force Base, we can get that. We can get that mission here. We can protect Shepherd Air Force Base, not just protect it, but grow it. So I'm out there on the campaign trail right now, and I'm not just talking about what I'm going to do as your congressman if you elect me to represent the 13th Congressional District. I'm showing the voters. I am going to make things happen. And I tell people all the time, the issue here and the big difference between me and my opponent, I'm the true conservative in this race. There's a lot of differences, and they're becoming more and more apparent as each day goes on. But the big difference right now is that Mac Thornberry's been our congressman for 26 years. He's got a lot of power, a lot of influence, a lot of authority. When he speaks, people listen. When he's got a problem, they want to help him fix it. He's been there 26 years, a lot of tenure. Well, the day he leaves, zero, gone. Freshman congressman. Guy's going to have no influence. Nobody's going to care who they are, where they came from, what their district is, or what their name is. They're not going to care. That's the way Congress is structured. It's unfortunate, but it's true. They're going to expect him to sit in the corner, color, and vote the way he's told to vote. Right? I'm the exception to that, and it's not because of Ronny Jackson. I like to think I have a little bit to do with it, but it's circumstance. I just came from the White House, and if I were telling you this 6 years from now, it wouldn't apply. If I were telling you this 6 years ago, it wouldn't apply. But I just came from the White House. I worked every day, side by side with the president. I know every single one of the cabinet secretaries, whether it's agriculture, commerce, energy, defense, the VA, they're all friends of mine. I took care of them and their families for the last 3 years. I have their home phone numbers, their cell phone numbers. You better bet when I call them, they're going to answer the phone, wanting to know how they can help me fix a problem. And I know everybody in the West Wing, Chief of Staff, National Security Advisor, Domestic Policy Council, all friends of mine. And I will be, if I'm blessed enough to represent this district, the only freshman congressman in this country that can legitimately walk into the Oval Office unannounced, tell the President of the United States, sir, I got something I got to make you aware of, and he will stop what he's doing and listen to me. And that's huge for this district. This district is about to go from one of the most senior members of Congress to a freshman congressman. And I can bridge that gap. I can bridge that gap, and I can take care of this district, and I can grow this district. And I am going to be an unbelievably staunch proponent and defender of ag. Right, I just say that on camera right now. You are not going to find a better, stronger, more active, more vocal opponent for ag. I'm going to take care of our farmers and our ranchers. I'm going to do it, I promise you. And I'm definitely going to take care of oil and gas too. I got a soft spot in my heart for oil and gas that put food on the table when I was growing up. Right? So I'm going to represent the things that are unique to this district, oil and gas, farming and ranching, and I'm going to protect and grow our defense industry here, whether it's Bell Helicopter, Pantex, or Shepherd Air Force Base. I'm going to take care of them. And I'm going to do all kinds of other stuff for this district, with regards to our pro-life stance up here. I'm staunchly pro-life with no exceptions. I'm going to protect our Second Amendment with no exceptions. It's a slippery slope. You give in on anything on the Second Amendment, you're going to end up losing that constitutional right. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to protect our borders. I'm going to help President Trump build that wall. He sent me out there 5 times in the last 2 years to gather information. I know the issues out there, and I know why we need that wall. I'm not just parroting President Trump's talking points. I've been out there, I've seen it firsthand. I've talked to the folks out there on that wall. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, ICE, HHS, all of them. I'm gonna work hard to continue with the president's deregulation. His deregulatory efforts have been what's responsible for this booming economy for the last 3 years, and we're gonna continue with that, and we're gonna continue, and one of the things we're gonna do, it hadn't been done yet, we're gonna deregulate healthcare. That's gonna drive our healthcare costs down, and we're gonna reform healthcare, and as a physician, I'm gonna be a big part of that. So it's kind of where I stand.
Sounds like you've got it figured out.
Yeah, we'll see. The voters will tell me.
Yeah, it's up to the voters.
That's
so,
right. That's right.
And when do the voters have an opportunity to vote?
Well, early voting starts on 29 June, and it extends all the way up until July the 10th, and election day is on 14 July. So you got to get out there and vote. It's going to be a hugely important election right now. It's a runoff election, so we've already done the primary, and about 100,000 people showed up in the election of the primary. And you'd know better than I do, but that's roughly 800,000 registered voters in the district. 100,000 show up, to vote.
Well, we have about 800,000 residents in the district, and about 426,000 are registered voters.
Okay, well that's even better, right? Because that's a good percentage. 100,000 showed up to vote. That's a good turnout.
Yeah, we had over 25%.
Yeah,
voter
and
turnout.
I think last time someone told me the last election was about 75,000, so that was a good turnout. But the problem with that is that was the primary. This is a runoff. I've been told, by folks that that are politicians that do this all the time. For a runoff election, you could probably cut that in half. Expect you're going to get about 50,000 in a regular runoff election, maybe. Then you have coronavirus superimposed on it. You move the runoff election from May 26 to 14 July. That's going to decrease it even more. So there could be as few as 45,000 voters, or even fewer potentially, in this district that decide who the congressman from the 13th Congressional District is. So your vote is super important. I mean, your vote carries a lot of weight. And I just tell people, it's get out there and vote. And, especially if you're going to vote for Ronny Jackson, find a couple other people to vote that are going to vote for Ronny Jackson, get them out to the polls. But, no, really, I think it's important for everybody to vote. I really do. So I just hope we get the vote out.
Well, the struggle I have as county chair is how to get people engaged and make them understand how important it is for them to, number one, be informed, but also to vote.
Yes.
It's just so I just can't fathom people not voting.
Yeah.
Because to me, everybody complains about inequality and,
Yeah.
the Democratic Party tries to divide people and race and economics and
Yep.
all these different levels they try to divide. But voting is the great equalizer.
It is.
We are all 100% equal in our vote.
Everybody's vote counts the same. Yep.
Melania's Trump vote, her vote counts exactly the same as mine.
Donald Trump's vote counts the same as yours.
That's right.
Yep.
And the poorest person in the poorest part of the Panhandle's vote is equal to your vote.
That's right. You're right.
And if they would just understand that.
Right. We do. We got to do that. We got to educate. And you're doing a great job, by the way. I appreciate what you're doing in Potter County. But getting the vote out. But it's just like you said. It's frustrating still to run onto folks sometimes. And I'm talking to them about this race that I'm in right now, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote for you in November." I'm like, no, you got November. You got to vote in the runoff election, right? The primary and the runoff election, and people just aren't thinking in those terms. They're not following politics closely enough to know when these dates are, and they get busy and they forget, and they're like, oh, did election day already pass? I didn't vote, and they literally wanted to vote, but so we got to make sure. I think, and if you're politically active out there and you care about the vote, like Dan and I do, I would say the thing you got to do is, as it gets closer to early voting and to election day, you got to remind people everywhere, get out and vote, get out and vote. And with early voting, you got 2 weeks to vote just about any day you want, up until election day. Yep. So get out and do it. I mean, and like I said, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's look at the women's suffrage movement,
Yep.
what all they went through and the hardships they had and the struggle they went through to get the right to vote.
That's right.
And now they don't vote.
Yep.
It just boggles my mind.
Yep.
So that's what I'm trying to work on, is how to get people engaged and informed. And that's kind of why we're having this interview.
Yep.
So,
well, my wife and I are working in Randall County. We own a home out in Randall County now, southeast of town, and we're beating the bushes out there, of course. But when I go to vote on 14th of July, I'm gonna load up the van and take a van load of folks with me, and I'll make sure if they need a ride, I'm going to pick them up. But get people out to the polls. I think that's what we got to do.
Exactly. So you mentioned the COVID problem. Where do you think that really originated? Do you have any?
Wuhan, China.
I mean, was it done on purpose, or was it a virus that just spread and they tried to cover it up?
Well, I don't know if it was done on purpose or not, but I can tell you without a doubt it came from that microbiology lab in Wuhan, where they do research on that particular virus from that particular organism, and so it's not a coincidence that they have that capability, they have that facility there, and they're doing research on that exact virus in Wuhan, and then it starts in Wuhan. It came from that lab. Now, whether they did it intentionally or it leaked out of that lab because they had poor procedures and started spreading, I don't know. What I do know is that the Chinese covered it up extensively, and they shut down travel from Wuhan to all other Chinese cities, yet simultaneously allowed travel from Wuhan to anywhere else in the world. They basically seeded the planet with this virus willingly, knowingly, right? And there's going to be a price to pay for that. I promise you. President Trump's he's walking a fine line right now, trying to make sure that these new trade negotiations that he's got with China, that they still hold up their end of the deal, including all of the ag that they're supposed to be buying from us over the next year or so, the billions of dollars that they're supposed to purchase in agricultural products from us. He's going to make sure that they do that, but he's looking for opportunity, and he will find it, because no one's stronger on China than President Trump. No one. He's looking for opportunity for them to pay for what's happened to our economy, and they will. I mean, I'm not opposed to canceling some of the debt we owe them. If we can identify that they crushed our economy and they did it willingly, knowingly, then they owe us money. We don't owe them money anymore. They owe us money, right? And I'm not afraid to do that. And whatever President Trump comes up with, I want to be in Congress with having his back and doing this. And that's why I'm President Trump's endorsed candidate in this race. My opponent will mention his name repeatedly because he's trying to attach himself to President Trump as well, because this is the most conservative district in the entire United States. It's Trump country up here, right? But President Trump has endorsed me in this race. He's told all the voters in this district he needs me in Congress so that I can have his back. I've mentioned this in passing a while ago. All Republicans are not created equal. We've got good Republicans and we got bad Republicans. And we've got Republicans that are nothing more than never-Trumpers and rhinos, and they've been a big part of the problem since day one. Yep. And they're out there. And we got people in this race. My opponent falls into that category. And so I tell people, if you want to support President Trump, elect me to Congress, and you'll be assured that you're going to have somebody that's going to have the president's back. I've had his back for 3 years. He's taken care of me for 3 years. We've got a strong relationship, and he has a lot of trust and confidence in me, and I, of course, have a lot of trust and confidence in him as our commander-in-chief and as our president. And I will do everything I can to make sure that we continue with his Make America Great, Keep America Great campaign in his agenda. So
a lot of people, you hear, if you watch on the news media, they indicate that Trump is disorganized, he's unfit for office. I don't know if you've seen anything about the latest book out by John Bolton. I haven't seen
John Bolton's an
anything
idiot. I know him. I worked with him, right? And honestly, John Bolton, nobody likes John Bolton. I mean, he can't make friends no matter what. The left doesn't like him, the right doesn't like him. Nobody gets along with him. He's a difficult person to get along with, right? And, some of the stuff he's putting in this book, I guess, I don't know, I haven't seen it, but excerpts supposedly are getting leaked out. Some of the stuff he put in this book is ridiculous. And, it's been refuted by people in the White House right now saying, I didn't say that. That did not happen, right? So, it's shameful to me that a man who had the president's trust and confidence and the trust and confidence of this country to be our national security advisor, right, that he's gonna go down this path, right? It's shameful. He's using this book to line his pockets, right? To line his pockets and to settle political scores or personal scores that he has with people in the Trump administration that didn't agree with him. And we can't have somebody who served at the level of our national security advisor in this country, being petty like that. It's just it's shameful. It's embarrassing, and it makes me mad. And, we'll see what happens. This book's going to come out. And, I think there's going to be stuff in this book that's actually going to validate a lot of what the president said. And, I already saw one excerpt that I thought was interesting today where he put in there, about how, everyone knows that he's a complete war hawk, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's his reputation from when he was in the United Nations until now, he's a war hawk. And, we had all this issue with Iran for a while, and there was this tit for tat with Iran, when they were harassing us, and they had shot missiles at us and things of that nature, and they were doing these flybys and bringing these small boats up to our carriers and our carrier groups and things like that. Anyways, there was a lot of stuff going on, and John Bolton admits in the book that he was pushing hard for the president to attack, just to make a huge, overwhelming statement and just really just destroy large parts of the Iranian infrastructure. And the president looked at it and he said, "Well, look, what's the cost here as far as lives go?" And they started giving the president information back, and he started looking at what Iran had done and what our retaliation was going to be. And despite the fact that everyone initially said President Trump's going to be reckless, he's going to get us in all kinds of wars and stuff, he hasn't done that. He's got us out of Iraq. He's getting us out of Afghanistan. And despite having a national security advisor who's an unbelievable war hawk, who's standing in the Oval Office telling President Trump that we need to strike Iran here, 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 and here and bring them to their knees. But the president looks at it and he said, you know what? We're not going down that path, So the president had great leadership, stepped up to the plate, decided what was the appropriate response and what wasn't appropriate. And despite the advice he was getting from John Bolton, he did the right thing and provided an appropriate response and kept us out of a war with Iran. Right, and that wouldn't have been good for any of us, right? And we still may go down that path someday. We don't know. I mean, Iran, they're difficult to deal with, but we did not need to pick a war with Iran at that particular time. The president saw the wisdom in retaliating, but do it in a measured way, and he did so despite the advice he was getting from John Bolton.
So Bolton was a bad hire.
Bolton was a bad hire. he was a bad hire for a variety of reasons. One, because he was very narrow-minded in his view of everything, being such a war hawk. Everything, was the same response for him. Just launch missiles at him, attack them, whatever. I mean, in my opinion, watching him for years, and I knew him. I was at the White House, the same time he was there. But he was a bad hire in that regard. But he was also just a bad hire because he's difficult to get along with. And I mean, he got in the White House and pretty quickly, like, nobody really wanted to do anything with him or have him in the meetings or the conversations. People just didn't like him, And you've got to be able to get along with people, at least the people that you work with and the people you work for, I'm all about, speaking your mind, but, we could have done better. And the president realized that, and that's why he got rid of him. And, Bolton's, upset about it, and that's part of what's happening right now, is trying to retaliate against the president and certain folks in the White House that didn't care for him.
Interesting. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell the voters before we wrap up?
No, I just think, I think I'm going to be a great representative for this district. I tell the voters, I'll make you two promises. If you elect me as your representative for the 13th Congressional District, number one, I promise I'll make you proud. And number two, I promise that everyone in this country will know who the representative from the 13th Congressional District is, because I'm going to be a loud, proud voice for the state of Texas and for this district. And I'm going to take care of this district. I promise you that.
Thank you.
The media seems to be making it out to be more deadly than it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This whole thing's been manipulated for political purposes. As soon as the Democrats realized that, that there was potential political gain in spinning this up and crashing our economy, they saw that as their best opportunity to potentially get the White House back, and they went over the top. And so you still, to this day, we have blue states, with governors and mayors all over these blue states, and it's not happening in the red states, it's just the blue states. They're still shut down. And they're doing that because they're trying to drag this out till it gets closer to November, hoping that it's going to keep the economy from coming back and take that feather out of the president's hat. Because he's going to get reelected, and if the economy's booming again like it was before, there ain't no way they're beating him, and they know that. So they're trying to drag this out. I mean, some of them are auditioning for maybe a vice presidential bid at this point. It's crazy, the stuff that they do. But they're putting their citizens and the law-abiding citizens and their constituents and small business owners and everybody else, they're ruining their lives and putting them in danger to do this. But they don't care. Their political aspirations, override everything, and that's sad. We shouldn't be like that. This is a period of time with this coronavirus where we should have all come together as Americans and done what was best for our country, for the health and safety of our country. And we would have figured out, like President Trump did, fairly quickly. We would have probably figured it out even quicker if everybody would have got on the same page, that this virus wasn't as bad as we initially thought it was going to be. It didn't have the mortality rate that was initially pitched. Initially, they were saying it was going to have a mortality rate of 10%. It has a mortality rate of like 0.1%. Which is about the same thing as the seasonal flu right now, right? And we now know that the vulnerable populations are kind of what we suspected but didn't know initially for sure, is the elderly, those with comorbidities, and those that are immunocompromised. And it doesn't affect kids. They may get it, but they don't get sick from it. And if you're young and otherwise healthy, you might get it. You probably don't even know you had it, or you'll get it and you'll get a fever and some flu-like symptoms for a couple days and move on about your business. Those are all things that we know about the virus now, including some medicines that are going to have an impact on the morbidity and the mortality of this. We could have figured that out a little bit earlier than we did, and if we're all on the same page, we could have rapidly got our economy back up and running. But we didn't, because of politics. And that's just that's a shameful part of what DC represents right now. It is a swamp and a sewer, and I hope we can get past that. We've got to get some good folks in Congress.
Because here in Texas, we even saw that judge. He kind of threw that salon owner.
Yeah.
In
I mean,
jail.
and that's just a perfect example of the hypocrisy out there, on the left. They're spun up about this salon owner who's just trying to keep, her family fed, right? And was following all the rules initially, and then trying her best, even when she opened the salon back up, to institute all these social distancing issues and mask and hand sanitizer and everything else, doing a great job, trying to be a responsible small business owner, right? But now, what do they? As soon as people want to protest about anything that the left agrees with, they don't care about that. And suddenly all of the rhetoric about we can't be in large groups because we're going to spread this coronavirus out the door with all the protests that we're seeing right now. None of the left's talking about that. It suddenly doesn't matter to them. But if it's a church, right, or if it's a small business, they're all over it. I mean, they'll literally try to drive them out of business. And that's just a shame, And the government shouldn't be picking winners and losers. And that's what they do. They had all these big box stores open, yet they were driving. You could go to Walmart or you could go to Home Depot and you could buy stuff there, but you couldn't go to the family-owned hardware store next door that never has more than 3 or 4 people in their store at any given time and buy anything. They ran those people out of business, right? And so that's the problem I have. I don't want the government picking winners and losers.
Right, because that judge, he even told her, if you apologize, kind of putting his ego out there.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I
Yeah.
wouldn't apologize.
It was all about the
So
judge. And you're right, it was ego. It was all about the judge and his ego. And that's a shame. I mean, that's petty.
Well, it seems to me like some of these governors, it's kind of went to their head with power.
Oh.
Like they saw they
Not
had an
just governors,
opportunity.
but mayors and
Exactly. I don't know what it is about certain people, but it seems like when they get, and I've seen it with employees.
Yeah.
But if they get a little bit of power,
Yeah.
I mean, they go nuts.
Yeah, they get the power and they get a little bit of publicity, get their 5 minutes in the spotlight, and they lose control of themselves, right?
Yep.
And it does go to their head, and it just and they make bad decisions, and they're not thinking about their constituents. If you're an elected official, you work for the people that elected you. They don't work for you, right? And some of our officials forget that. They get in office and they feel like that suddenly they're in charge, and their constituents answer to them, and that's not the way it works. It's the other way around. You answer to your constituents, right? And we've just forgotten that in lots of places in this country. So
Yeah, I deal with that all the time at the
Yeah.
local level. They think we work for them, and I have to educate them.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, and I was going to ask you too about the current situation with the Black Lives Matter and the riots and chaos going on. What do you think's behind all of that?
Well, I think it's the left again. I mean, it's the left and it's the far left and the liberal press. I mean, it is. This is not about the death of Mr. Floyd anymore. I mean, that's a horrible thing to watch. I don't approve of that at all. That man should not have died. And that I'm not even going to call him a police officer. That bad apple that was wearing a badge. He should be held responsible for his actions. And he should go to prison. And he probably will. But he does not represent law enforcement in this country. The vast majority of law enforcement in this country, 99% of them are out there every single day, putting their lives on the line, protecting our property, our families, and our lives, right? And this we have somehow or another developed a culture in this country over the last 10 or 15 years that completely disrespects our law enforcement, completely. And it's been building for a while, and it's come to a head now. But those protests are not about the death of Mr. Floyd anymore. They're about anarchists like this Antifa group, these bunch of idiots Antifa that are nothing but a bunch of grunge hippies from Washington State and Oregon and stuff, running around with masks and just burning and looting and destroying private property. That's what they're all about. It's about those folks and a bunch of criminals that live in some of these large urban areas, taking advantage of Mr. Floyd's death and going out there and destroying private property, destroying small businesses, and stealing and looting everything they can get their hands on, right? And it's all in the name of Mr. Floyd and his death. If I was a member of the African American community right now, I would be very offended by that. You know what I mean? That's not what this protest is supposed to be about. I am all about peaceful protest. I think that it's what makes our country great, that we can protest. I support the First Amendment, free speech, and peaceful protest, but I support peaceful protest. I don't support the complete anarchy and lack of law and order that we have right now, because that victimizes law-abiding citizens and small business owners and people that are just trying to get by and just trying to make a living and trying to do what's right. They're the victims here, right? And I feel bad for these people that live in these poor urban areas where this stuff is really taken off, because they don't have the ability or the resources to leave. They have to stay in there and endure what's going on right now, right? And so all of this talk about getting rid of the police force and things of that nature. It's complete garbage. I mean, right? We have these morons in Congress like Ilhan Omar, right? You won't find anybody more stupid than she is. I mean, it's just a fact, right?
Yeah.
She's, I can't believe she's a member of Congress for a variety of reasons, not the least of which she doesn't even want to be an American and almost freely admits it, right? And she hates this country and almost freely admits that, or may have already admitted it. Her actions speak louder than her words on that for sure, right? She's representing Minnesota in Minneapolis, where this is all going on. She says, initially when this first started coming out, that she wants to disband the police force in Minneapolis completely, get rid of them. And she wants to reimagine public safety. Reimagine public safety. She was born and raised in Mogadishu, right? That is one of the most lawless, murderous cities you will ever be. I've been there. I've been to Mogadishu. Mogadishu is a lawless, murderous city, right? And what is she reimagining? Is she reimagining Minneapolis looking like Mogadishu? Because if you take the police force out of Minneapolis, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like Mogadishu, right?
Well, that's what they want.
Exactly. And I just, it's our country is just headed down the wrong path with all of this, right? I mean, we are on a bad trajectory right now, and we have got to get the moral high ground. And I think that's the biggest issue in our entire country right now, is our country is in sharp moral decline right now. And we got to get it back. We got to get the moral high ground back. We got to get our youth back. We've had generations of youth now that have been brainwashed by the far left, the liberal press, and our educational system, primary and university level. They brainwashed our kids to think that this is a horrible place to live, that there are better places in the world to live than the United States, and they're not proud to be Americans, right? That's horrible. None of those kids have ever been anywhere besides the United States. I've been to 120 different countries during my time in the military. I can tell you firsthand, there's no better place to live than right here in the United States. None, right? So it's just shameful, and it just breaks my heart to see that these kids, are growing up thinking this. And so we got to figure out how to get that back. We do. Our country's not going to be salvageable if we don't.
Yeah, it's scary. And the United States is the best country to live in, and the Panhandle of Texas
You bet.
is the best place
That's right.
in America.
Doesn't get any better.
That's it.
Yeah.
Y'all were talking about Black Lives Matter. And me and Dan were talking about this before.
Right.
I think in bigger cities, there is an issue with some of the police, like in
Right.
New York,
Mhm.
the LAPD historically, by the numbers, they've been harder on,
Yeah.
the black and minority
Right.
communities. What would you tell, the minority communities
Well-
of, the Panhandle? Why should they vote for you? Because there are some issues that they do face that
Right.
aren't making it.
Absolutely. I don't disagree that there's that there's a lot of relationships there that could be much better between the police and those communities. It's a double-edged sword. That's kind of a problem, right? I mean, the reason it's like that is because that's where the crime's at actually right now, right? I mean, if you go to the affluent neighborhoods in these places, there's no one standing on the corner selling crack, selling heroin, right? And there's not prostitutes and stuff like. But if you go to the inner cities where these poor populations are at, that's where this is happening, right? So that's where the police are focused. That's where the police are concentrated. That's where all the conflict arises, right? And then the police get in this environment where it's, where they have to get a pretty aggressive and kind of defensive posture just to do their job, because a lot of the criminals there, not the good law-abiding people that live there, which need the police there to protect their communities, but the criminals in that area, they have weapons and all kinds of stuff, just like the police do. And there's this, I guess, environment that develops between the police, and that's where I think we can make improvements, right? We can figure out how can we take the police force and still have them do their job and protect those law-abiding citizens, but come up with a better relationship with that community, right? We've got to develop that community relationship between the police and the citizens. And I think that the good law-abiding citizens, they don't want to feel like that the police are preferentially, seeking out, young black men to as targets, but they don't want the drugs and and all the crime and stuff that are in their neighborhoods either. They want to They want to have the same, ability to live a life and raise their family like you and I do that may not live in those depressed urban areas, right? They just want to get by. They want to work hard and make a living and take care of their families. And we got to figure out a way to make that happen. And community policing is going to be something we have to figure out how to do, right? So we got to, but the first step, I'm going to be honest with you, is, those communities have to figure out a way to respect and appreciate the police officers. And then the police officers have to reciprocate, and want to be there and want to take care of those good law-abiding citizens. But they have to be able to get in there and do their job. And part of doing their job is arresting folks that are out there, breaking the law. And so we can figure it out if we all come together. And I'm a proponent. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, to me, all lives matter, and all Black lives matter. And a lot of this stuff that's being driven is being driven because it serves the agenda of the left sometimes. And if all Black lives matter, I want to see Black Lives Matter get out there. I want to see them in Chicago, where they have the highest teen murder rate in the entire United States, and they're all young Black men dying every day there, right? And we got to get in there. We got to fix that, right? We got to fix all these problems. But all lives matter. Black lives matter. Blue lives matter. I care about the police officers and police officers getting killed in this environment as well. So I say, we got to go back to, and I think we're better at it up here in the 13th Congressional District because we have those strong Christian conservative values, right? And we're taught early on, doesn't matter what color you are, black, white, right? We're all God's children. He created us all. And we got to start approaching life like that. We got to start approaching life like, hey, you have the same rights that I have. I don't care what your skin color is. God made both of us. He put us both here for a purpose. I don't have any right to impinge on your individual freedoms and vice versa. And we should love each other, and we should treat others like we want to be treated. If we just went back to that one basic thing, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, obviously none of our problems would exist, right? But we got to get back to that. We have to get past the politics. We have to get past this, the identity politics have killed this country, to be honest with you. For the last, at least I think especially during the 8 years of the Obama administration, everything that happened in this country revolved around identity politics. It was gay, straight, black, white, male, female. They forced everybody to feel like they had to pick a team. We don't want to pick a team. We're all Americans, right?
We're all on the same team.
We're all on the same team. We're all Americans, And so I just don't want to be like that anymore. I don't want the country to be like that anymore. I want to figure out how we get past this. But first and foremost, we got to regain that moral high ground. We got to get God back into this country, right? God back into our schools and back in our government and everything else. And we have to do unto others. We'd have them do unto us. And I just think that's the key.
Because another thing is the police, they're asked to do a lot.
Yeah.
Their mental health, they have to respond to drug, they have to, if a dog's running around biting people, they're usually the first to show up. So do you think that the police are also overworked and asked to do too much?
Well, I think they're in a bad position. They're kind of in a position right now where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. You know what I mean? If they get out there and they do their job, they're second guessed no matter what they do, and there's cameras everywhere, so everybody videotapes it and everybody spins it a certain way. And, it's a lot of them are tried in the public, tried by public opinion before they get an opportunity, to actually somebody to really look at what the circumstances surrounding the incident was. So I'm the first to admit there's bad apples out there in the police force. There are bad apples in my community as a physician. There are bad apples in the military where I was at. There are bad apples if you're a teacher. We've all got people that don't represent our community and don't represent our community the way we want them to. And we've got to find ways to get rid of them. And I'll be honest with you, I think that the police have to do a better job of policing themselves as well, right? Part of the problem we see sometimes, and I'm a huge supporter of the police in this country. I will go to bat for cops in this country all day long, every day. But our police unions have to be able to hold those people accountable, right? And the teachers are the same way. We have the same problem with the teachers union, right? We have people that are obviously not suited to be police officers and not suited to be teachers, but the unions protect them and keep them in their jobs. And we can't do that anymore. We have to police our own.
Because in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
I think the head of the union there, that he's had several complaints. He's been seen wearing, these biker jackets with these Aryan Brotherhood symbols on them, and it seems like people like that are in these positions of power. so they take up for the bad cops making the bad cops,
Yeah.
or the good cops look bad.
And it's not just, you know, an individual thing. It's the culture of the public unions, you know, and it's just like they have this mentality that no matter what the issue is, they have to like defend someone that's a member of their union, and that's not the case, right? You know, there's certain people they have to cut loose, right? And we got to learn to cut them loose. Cut them loose. It's for the good of everybody, right? Then the other cops, the good cops that are out there, like I said, working hard every day to take care of us, then they don't have to live with the consequences of the bad actions of the people that don't need to be there, right? Because that's what we have happening right now. We have good cops that are now living with the consequences of a few bad actors, right? And now they can't do their job, and their hands are tied, and they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. So we just have to get past that. We have to figure out how to make that happen. We can do it.
I guess the point I might make, and I think that the Republican candidates ought to be making the point, is why are we Republicans?
Yeah.
You know, the Republican Party was started in 1854 in Minneapolis as the anti-slavery party. The Republican Party of Texas was started in 1876 by 150 blacks. The first chair of the state party of Texas for the first 10 years was a black guy named Kuhn. K-U-H-N, I believe.
President,
And historically, the blacks always voted Republican.
President Lincoln, Republican, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, and he freed the slaves.
Well, I think also here's the other problem.
So
that I
they've
have.
got it
Yeah.
backwards, and
They
they
do.
don't need to, if they really looked at the issues, hopefully they'll finally come to the realization that the Democratic Party has simply been using them.
Well, the Democrats have, I mean, they've just taken the black vote for granted. I mean, they've just they don't they don't even try to try to address issues with the black community anymore, because they just feel like they got that vote, and that's their vote, and they just take it for granted. And we as Republicans got to start realizing that they're doing that, which we are, and we got to go out there and we got to seek the black vote, right? We got to go out there and we got to, the black vote, the Hispanic vote. I'm all about. We got to get minorities in our party. We do in much larger numbers, and we can do I personally, my personal views, I want, especially here in Texas, I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic community, in where I grew up. Most of the folks I went to school with were Hispanic, a lot of them. Maybe not 50%, but pretty close, right? I worked out in the oil field with almost all Hispanic folks when I worked out there. Some of the hardest working people I've ever been around, right? Huge family folks, right? They love, they keep the family together, right?
Yep.
Family's important to them, right? They're mostly Catholic, which means that they're religious, they're pro-life. I mean, these are people that should belong to the Republican Party, right? And we need to go out and get them. We need to tell them, that they're one of us, that, that we represent what they represent. We think the way they think on these issues. We got to bring them in. But, they're just, the left's out there, with the rhetoric that, folks in the Republican Party are racist and this, that, and the other. And we're not, you know what I mean? And sure, there's a little fringe somewhere on both sides of the party. There's these fringe efforts that are out there, that are disgusting, that I don't want, but we're not, I mean, we are the party that represents those issues I was just describing, that those communities, hold dear, and so we got to get them. We got to go out there. We got to tell them, we got to invite them to be part of our party. We got to sell it to them. We got to tell them what we can do for them. They got to bring them on board and make them part of the team.
Well, it all boils down to education, and I think the biggest problem we probably have in this country is that the education system has failed us.
Yep.
They keep wanting more money, but I think we really need to just revisit the whole. To me, it's not the police departments we need to revisit. It's the education system.
Oh yeah, our education system is a disaster right now. I mean, primary education, university level, they've just brainwashed our kids. I tell people all this story all the time, and it's not just New Jersey, New York, San Francisco, L.A. It's in Texas now too. Austin, Texas is gone as far as I'm concerned. We're not going to get Austin back, I don't think. I hope we do, but they're coming after Dallas and Houston and other places, and they're knocking on the door in 13. But I tell people all the time, the very first day, the day that I filed for office here, I was driving into Austin because I had to file in Austin, Texas, because 41 counties. I flew into Dallas, picked up my pickup truck. I drove straight to Austin. I was driving into the Austin city limits. I heard on the radio, that the Austin School Board was discussing a resolution that as part of the required sex education classes for third graders, that they were now going to require that they have some type of orientation or instruction or some kind of introduction to anal sex. Third graders, are you kidding me? Third graders. But that is what the far left and the liberal press are doing when it comes to the education of our kids. And I'm telling you right now, I tell this to people on the trail all the time, potential voters out there that I'm talking to about my race and about the 13th Congressional District. You put me in Congress, one of the very first things I'm going to do, I'm going to lead the charge, and there are other people in Congress that want to do this, and President Trump would probably support this. We lead that charge. We need to get rid of the education department. We don't need the education department. They do nothing for us here. Education of our kids is a state and local issue. I do not want people in the federal government, people in LA and San Francisco and New York and New Jersey picking out the curriculum and the books for my kids, telling me what my kids got to learn. I want the folks up here in the 13th Congressional District that share my good conservative Christian values and my Texas values, educating my kids and picking out the curriculum for my kids. So we need federal government out of our education system. And then we need to go in, and those universities that are out there that are discriminating against conservative folks and Republicans and people on the right and getting away with it and taking taxpayers' dollars to brainwash our kids, we need to stop that too. Right? That's got to stop. And so I'm a big proponent of really reforming how we educate our kids.
Yeah, a lot of issues that we deal with at the federal level shouldn't be federal issues. They're state issues.
Yeah, they need to protect us, and we need a strong defense, but there's a lot of stuff that over the years that they've taken responsibility for, they have no business being involved in,
I don't believe Texans should tell people in Delaware how to run their state.
Yeah, I agree. States' rights, I'm a big fan.
Nor anybody else, so yeah. Well, it sounds like you're well in tune with the voters of the 13th District, and we wish you luck on the campaign trail.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me today. I enjoyed it. We'll get back and do it again soon.
Sounds good. Anytime.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Appreciate it. You betcha.